Greetings everyone, my name is Saibal Ray as the current biology faculty from Nucleon Coaching Institute situated at the Pokrajhar Institute. We are glad to have you back with us and I am glad to have you back with us. Along with that, today we will be learning about a few big key concepts regarding the Mendelian genetics as well as the chapter itself, that is principles of inheritance and variation. So without delaying any further, let's proceed on to it. The first thing that we need to understand is what itself is Mendelian genetics. Okay, what itself is Mendelian genetics, and for that I have a very beautiful definition for you that I feel that everyone should know about. That is, in case of Mendelian genetics, okay, first term itself is Mendelian, okay, named after the great scientist Gregor Johann Mendel. Okay. Gregor Johann Mendel. Okay. So why do we need to study about Mendelian genetics as such? Mendelian comes from the word Mendel itself, that is from the name of the scientist itself, Gregor Johann Mendel, who gave us the theory on inheritance, okay, on how to calculate or how to give you a probability on what will be the traits or the characters that are being passed from the parents to offspring. Now, I have said quite a lot of words, so we will go with them, or we will try to understand them systematically. First things first, what is genetics? What itself is genetics? So, genetics is nothing but the study of inheritance and variation. Okay? What is genetics? Genetics is the study or the branch of science that deals with inheritance and variation. Now, what is this inheritance? Inheritance can simply be said that suppose your father acquired a 1 acre of land. Okay. 1 acre of land. By what right can he transfer it to you, his son or daughter? By what right can he transfer his acquired property to you, his son or daughter? That is your inheritance. That specific property through which he can transfer his acquired property to you, that is his son or daughter. Okay, that is called as inheritance. But what is variation? What is variation? So, taking the example that we just discussed about the inheritance of land, okay, suppose from that 1 acre, okay, from that 1 acre, he gave about 0.5 acres of land to charity, okay, to charity. Okay. The rest of the 0.5 acres you will inherit, correct? But this is not the 1 acre that he has acquired, correct? That is not the 1 acre that he has acquired, and henceforth it is not passed in its truest sense to you. This is called as variation. This is called as variation. Simply, in very simple words, variation is nothing but difference. Okay? It is nothing but difference, okay, in the inheritance of something. Now, what is this 1 acre itself? We, in terms of genetics, call this to be character. What do we call this? We call this, in terms of genetics, to be character. Okay? Now, all of these I will explain in a bit. Inheritance is nothing but the acquisition or the acquiring of any character. Now what is this character, you may ask? Okay, what is this character? Now character is your expression, right? Whatever you are decided by the character of your heart, correct? In that, what do you express? If your heart possesses courage, then that is a character. If your heart possesses cowardice, then that is also a character. Character is something that defines a particular way or defines a particular property. In genetics also, character is nothing but the expression of some biochemical aspect. Okay? Suppose your eye color, right? Eye color, right? In this eye color, you can have a blue, a bit grey, somewhere in between green, and most commonly brown. Correct? If I am missing some other iris colors, please do let me know in the comment section. Okay. So brown, grey, green, and blue. These are all your different forms of colors for eye. So in a very simple sense, let me explain it to you. Your eye color by definition becomes character. Correct? But then what does these become? What do these become? These become something called as traits. Okay? What do these become? These become traits. Blue, green, grey, brown, all these variations in your character is defined by the traits that you possess. Okay? I am repeating the sentence itself. The variation in your character is defined by the traits that you possess. Okay. In that sentence, we have mostly completed or mostly figured out what is inheritance, what is variation, what are character, what are traits. But the question still arises, what controls these? Right? What is that single criteria or the single sole aspect which controls or drives all this inheritance? That is through gene. Correct? That is through gene. Now, what is this gene? If somebody were to ask you, what is this gene? Gene is something which is a sequence. Okay? A sequence / segment. A sequence / segment of DNA. Okay? Of DNA that shows expression. Of characters. Correct? A sequence or a segment of DNA that shows or expresses your characters. This is what gene is, right? If you consider this, then this is a double-stranded helix, or this is your DNA, correct? This is your double-stranded DNA, correct? Now, gene by definition is this one. That means a segment, a particular segment or a small piece of the DNA that is able to show you some form of character. Okay? But there is something different also. Genes have something called as an alternating. Genes have something called as an alternating form. Genes have something called as an alternating form. Now, what are these alternating forms? They are called as alleles. Okay? They are called as alleles. Now, recall, just to our previous example, I gave you an example of eye color, right? I gave you an example of eye color. In that eye color itself, we found a green, a blue, a brown, and a bit grey. Correct? These are the 4 colors that you found in your irises, right? These are the 4 colors that you found in your irises, and I told them these are nothing but traits, right? I should mention this then. Characters are controlled by gene. Okay. Characters or the expression of the characters is controlled by gene. But what controls the expression of traits? The control or the mechanism for regulating the expression of traits is allele. Easy to remember? Easy to remember? If there is gene, it will control your character. If there is allele, it will control your traits. Okay? I've shown you simply the colors. Okay? Now, moving ahead. Okay. Moving ahead with the PDF also, or sorry, PPT also that I have prepared for you, so that we may also learn along with you having enough time to write something if you feel like writing. Okay. So this is a very common sense. Okay. Everyone resembles their parents. Resembles. They are not identical copies. Why? Because of something called as variation. Okay. Why could not they be identical copies? Why are you not the identical copies of your parents? Because there is something called as variation in your inheritance. Although you are acquiring 50% of both the characters from your parents, yet you do not possess the entirely true copy of your parents. That is because of variation. Okay. So see, genetics is the branch of life science that deals with the study of heredity and variation. We have already seen it. Okay. Heredity, what is this heredity? This is nothing but the transmission of characters. Okay. Variation is the difference among the offspring within their parents. There is environmental variation, there is hereditary variation. Hereditary variations are genetic and can be transferred. However, environmental variations are non-heritable. Why? Because when you are influenced by an environment, that is a temporary change. Suppose right now it is hot almost everywhere in the country. So you sweat a lot. Can you name it in a sense that this sweating or the sweats a lot gene has been passed along to your offsprings, or have you noticed it in your family? Do they sweat a lot in any time of the day or at any season of the day, whether it is cold, whether it is hot? No. It is basically environment influenced. It is an environment influenced character or a trait that needs to be transferred, that need not be transferred. Okay. That does not need to be transferred. Why? Because it is an adaptation for you to survive the current environment that you inhabit, not the outcome of the possible environment that you will inhabit. Okay. I hope I'm not going too fast. Okay. Now, learning about the man himself who gave us this beautiful idea on what is genetics. Okay. Gregor Johann Mendel, an Austrian monk who lived from 1822 to 1884. Such a tragic tale. Such a tragic tale. Why? Because at that time everyone was much more fascinated with the Darwin's theory of evolution, that everybody chose to, or basically could not comprehend his works. The first time he approved, or first time he proposed in 1857 in Burnwich, his own paper, plant hybridization, it was rejected. It was rejected on the basis that it was deemed too complicated and deemed too hypothetical for it to be approved. And there are some other factors also, or there were some other factors also. But after he died, that is in 1884, you will learn about this also, that in the 1900s it was rediscovered, and then people came to know about the brilliance of Gregor Johann Mendel. Okay? So we should pay a tribute to him and learn from him that failures do not mean that success is far away. Okay? A takeaway message for you all. See, published his results, translation of the characters, that is experiments on plant hybridization. Okay? And then he is regarded as the father of genetics, and as such he has given you 2 laws, not 3 laws. There are only 2 laws. There are only 2 laws of Mendel. That is, first, law of segregation, also called as universal law. Okay? This does not change, and every living organism that shows sexual reproduction must follow this law of segregation. Then there is second, law of independent assortment. Law of independent assortment. This, however, has an exception that we will be discussing in later classes. Okay. There are 2 laws that Mendel proposed, not 3. Law of dominance is not a law. Now you may ask, why do you consider law of dominance to not be a law? That is because dominance as such is a condition. Let me give you a very good example. You may feel that you are dominant at some place. Okay. Let's suppose that in schools or in colleges you may feel that in your own friend circle or in your own friend group you are the most dominant one, that everybody listens to you whenever you have to speak. But trust me, that is not your dominance. Why? Because that is a conditional one. It is in a condition where nobody else is able to object or nobody else is able to raise their own voices. But in a condition where some of them are able to raise their voices, you will no longer be the dominant one. Right? And hence, this same condition applies to your inheritance as well. Okay? Wherein you will find that law of dominance says that it is the dominance of alleles. But then again, it is only possible when it is in that particular environment or in that particular state, whether it is in a heterozygous state or whether it is in a homozygous state. Okay? That is a condition dependent one. That is not a universal one. Okay? Okay. So, in this law of segregation and law of independent assortment, I will give you some time to write it also. Okay. In the next parts. See, he was born in the poor family of Moravia in Austria, okay, during the time of First World War. Okay. He suspended his school due to the poverty. In 1843, he joined the church as a monk. In 1847, he became the head of the monastery in Brunn, Austria. Austria is now Czechoslovakia. Okay, not Australia, my bad. That's Austria. Okay. In 1851, he went to the University of Vienna to study natural history and mathematics for 2 years, and after his return, he came back to be a teacher in mathematics. He is actually a teacher in mathematics, he's not the teacher of biology. That is why in genetics we use more mathematical formulations than in any other branch. Okay? And during this period, he designed a breeding experiment of the pea. Okay? Pea, that is your table pea. Okay? Pisum sativum. Okay? If you want to write it, okay. The scientific name for pea is Pisum sativum. Okay? In 1865, he published his results, translation of the natural characters in the Natural History of Society of Bonn, where for the first time when he started proposing it in the 1857, his own research papers, it was rejected at first. Okay? In the 1900s, okay, there were three major scientists who discovered Mendel's work. There were three major scientists who discovered Mendel's work, which were Hugo de Vries, Franz Correns, and Erich Schermack in Austria. These three are credited with the rediscovery. Okay? Rediscovery. Okay? Rediscovery of Mendelian genetics or classical genetics. Okay? And therefore Mendel is regarded as the father of classical genetics. Okay? This is very important. Okay? Because there is someone who is the father of modern genetics also. We will come to him in later classes. Okay? This is the university. Okay. Now, in his experiment, okay, if you can see from here also, in his experiments, he took, before I move into this, I need to explain to you what is this dominance and what is this recessive, right? Let me come to it. If there is a term of dominance, remember we are talking about, or we are talking in the context of alleles, okay? We are talking in the context of alleles. We are talking in the context of alleles, and hence, if some allele, okay, let's say A, let's say an allele that controls human eye color, or to be very precise, it's not eye color, it is actually iris, right? Iris color is I. Okay? The gene itself is I. Okay? This is I is a gene. Okay? Now, in this I gene itself, if I show it in two various ways, or to more than two various ways, I plus, okay, and small I, okay, and another, okay, I plus plus, okay. If I show it through this, why? Because I've taken three of the most common types of colors, okay. If I plus represents your blue, okay, small I represents green, okay, and I plus plus represents brown, okay, relatively more common, okay, okay, brown. Now, the most common iris color that you will find all across the world is brown. Why is that? Why do you find brown iris color more frequently than rest of these? That is because of something called dominance of the allele. Okay? So I plus plus is an allele. Okay, I plus plus is an allele which shows dominance across the board. Okay? How do we say something to be dominant? Okay. How do we say something to be dominant? And how do we say something to be the opposite of that, that is recessive? Okay. How do we say that? Dominance is when, okay, so let's say 100 population, okay, or I should frame my sentences a bit nicely, okay. You might get confused with this. So let's say in a population of 100, okay, in a population of 100, okay, 100 can be whatever, okay, it can be animals, it can be humans, it can be birds, whatever you want. In a population of 100, okay, let's assume that for a character we have two elements, okay. For example, for the character of eye color, okay, we have two traits, that is brown and blue, correct? Brown and blue. We are just taking an example. In case of brown, let's say out of 100 individuals, you find 70 to be brown iris color, and the rest 30 to be blue. Do you know how do we consider this to be dominant and recessive? This frequency is the indicator of how much a allele expresses. That means brown becomes dominant. Brown becomes dominant, 30, okay? 30 becomes recessive. Okay? This becomes recessive. More the frequency, chances of it becoming dominant is more. Less the frequency, chances of it becoming recessive is more. Okay? This is simply the condition. Now tell me, do you feel like this can be considered as a law? If you do feel like, do let me know in the comments and I will listen to your reasoning as well. For now, I feel we have cleared mostly every form of basics that you need to know before we proceed further. Okay? Before we proceed further, we needed to understand all this. Okay. I hope I have made it clear for you. Through dominant and recessive itself. We will discuss about this, okay, in the later videos and later uploads. Okay. Do keep reading and do let me know what is your answer. Okay. I'll be waiting for it. Okay. Thank you.